Welcome to Yes Also. I'm Susie Barrett. My guest today is the insanely talented and wildly successful Peter Grosz. You know him from Veep and also from the long-running Sonic campaign where he's improvising Sonic commercials in a car with TJ Jagodowski. He's the winner of 2 Emmys for his work as a writer on the Colbert Report, and last year he was in the Broadway show Goodnight Oscar. On the improv front, he did I.O., Second City, Boom Chicago, and those of you in New York are fans of him from 4 Square, 2 Square, 3 Square sometimes, as well as Ass Cat and Rat Scraps. We cover so much ground in this episode, including a large section where Peter talks about the process of submitting as a writer for late-night TV, which I found really interesting. And he's the first guest we've had who crosses into the Delaverse. Yes, Peter studied with the Del Close. You don't want to miss the pics from this week's episode, including a bunch of shots of Peter and Seth Meyers from their college days and beyond. Those are on Instagram at YesAlsoPod. And if you've been liking the podcast, please help us spread the word by sending it to someone you think would like it. Okay, enough intro. Here's the episode. You were a Northwestern guy, right? Meow Show?
Yes, I was a Northwestern Meow Show guy. I graduated from Northwestern in '96. And I auditioned for the show every year before then. And there were people like a year older than me who had this real lock on the show. Like those people were in it every year, and then they all graduated, and it just opened up like a bunch of slots for people. And so Seth Meyers and Rob Janis were people that were in it when I was in it.
Cool. And and this is sketch and short form.
Yeah.
So were you like a short form first guy, or were you also doing long form at that point or before that?
When I got to Northwestern and I started auditioning and not getting it, I was frustrated, and I was like, there's got to be I should better my skills. I'm not just going to like get this at some point without learning how to improvise. So when I was a junior, I asked this guy, Ed Herbstman, who was somebody who was a year above me, who was part of that gang of people that were all really good and close friends and only 1 year older than me. I said, when you all graduate, I really want to try to make it into Meow. So where should I take classes? And I assumed he was going to say Second City.
And also, can you hurry up and graduate early so I can get in there?
I talked to the provost, and they said that you actually are here too long, that you are all staying here too long.
This letter is handwritten in your handwriting.
Yeah.
You spelled provost wrong.
Doesn't matter. That's not the important part, the provost said. He just said something about you getting the fuck out of here. Yeah.
So you thought he was going to recommend Second City.
I did, totally. And I thought that just because I had heard of it, and he said, no, don't go there, go to Improv Olympic. And his specific note for that was they have better teachers. Just at that time, this was like the spring this was 94, 95. So I started in April of 95. I went to I.O. and started taking classes. And then by the next fall, I had 6 months of classes under my belt, which is not that much, but for between 0 and 6 months to get into a college improv show is like light years. It was huge.
Yeah. I mean, any extra stage time at that point and any instruction and guidance, I feel like when I was in college, we were all kind of flailing, looking up games in books or like doing games they played on Whose Line Is It Anyway and not knowing what we were doing.
Totally.
So yeah, to have some long form training and actual scene work under your belt is even 6 months is huge.
Yeah, it was great.
Who were your teachers during those 6 months at I.O.?
I had Sharna Halpern. I don't know if people know her.
I have heard of her.
Yeah, Sharna. Miles Stroth was level 2. Matt Besser was level 3, and another young unknown named Del Close was my level 4 teacher.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're the first person I've interviewed who has straddled into the Delosphere.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about that. What was Del like as a teacher? What was your first impression? And also, did you know anything about his reputation or anything before you took the class?
I did, because I didn't know much. I mean, I didn't know anything about I.O. When I showed up, but I showed up at a pretty fortuitous time. I got there right after the Clark Street Theater opened up, so they had been down the street at whatever that bar was, not Cross Currents. Oh, Wrigley Side, right? It was just like halfway down the block. They didn't have their own theater. They were sort of like upstairs and in the back. But it was just like another spot that wasn't their own theater, so they just opened it up. But when I first started, the Armando Diaz theatrical experience in Hootenanny was just beginning. So I saw like the first Armando show.
Wow.
With Armando as the monologist. And it was him, for the first, I don't know, 6 months or whatever it was. And it
What's the origin story there? Was he someone who had a particularly storied life, and the genesis was, oh man, you should tell stories from your life? Yeah.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
I think it was like maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I don't know if he was the world's best improviser, but he had cool stories and was well liked, and they were like, this is a good use of your talents. I might be getting that wrong, but I was around for that. That was really great. I mean, that was like the way people treated ASCAT or whatever, years later, the various theaters. And then through Miles's class, through Besser's class, they all talked about Del. Sharna talked about Del, and then I was on teams with and the other team people had taken classes with Del beforehand. We got to put on a team some of us got put on teams right after our first round of classes. So after 8 weeks.
Wow.
And it wasn't everybody. And I wasn't like hot shit improviser, but I was good enough to be on a team, and they were, kind of looking to fill the schedule out. I just had like heard tale, but I have to say that when I got there, Del was like sleepy, uninspired, definitely not the Del Close that was like maybe 2 or 3 years before, or even 2 or 3 years after. 2 or 3 years after, he was like, everybody loved him. He had like found all this new energy, and I think it was like in the last 2 years of his life. I think he died in 99, right? Or 2000.
Yeah. What happened there? Do you know what reinvigorated him?
I don't
Juicing?
know. I think he actually, in a weird way, kind of like he may have gotten sober to some degree. I think Sharna was like, his health was like bad. I think she could just sense that he was middling, and she was like, he's too brilliant to be middling. So she, not because obviously on substances he was also brilliant and manic and just genius, and he was like just in like a place of like bleh, which is not that's not a place that a genius should be in. It's like
he was just doing enough drugs.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, you either have to smoke crack or do heroin. You can't just be like, I'm on like moderating pills or whatever it was.
Right. Get sober or do every drug.
Yeah.
I can't have you in the middle.
Yeah.
I heard Odenkirk tell a story recently about Del going to old rummage sales or like estate sales and finding bottles, apothecary bottles or old pharmacy bottles of mystery medicines from like the early 1900s and just taking them.
Yeah, totally.
Just like mystery 1900 pills.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just a different it's a different makeup. It's like the free solo gene of drugs,
Yeah. Oh,
just
totally.
no amygdala.
No, like is the amygdala the like the rational part of the part?
Yeah,
that, like,
or the part that initiates fear and risk.
Right, the lizard brain. Yes, exactly. Yeah. What's funny is I'm sure there were tons of people that lived life that way, but they just died when they were like 28,
Right. Yeah. Maybe some of those pills did him right.
Yeah.
those non-FDA approved pills would have us all living well into our hundreds.
I bet some of the things he found at old rummage sales were like Dr. Henderson's Miracle Liver Tonic, and he like from like 1906.
Right.
Yeah.
Made from the teeth of dead children.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
they died so you could live.
Yeah. Had you also, we didn't start at the very beginning. Had you been doing improv or comedy or anything in your younger years?
No, nothing in high school. I mean, I was like in a play in high school, but for me, I was like one of those people who watched SNL and recorded it on a, like a actual VCR and then like watched it back and like just transcribed the sketches and would do that with stand-ups.
So did you always want to go into comedy? Like for
me, it wasn't like going into it. Was just I just did that because I just was drawn to it the way a lot of people are. there's probably some 12-year-old who's listening to this podcast because they love improv so much and they just like found their way to it. But no, I never thought about going into it. When I got to college, I went to college and had no major. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I was like going to be a psych major. I just thought maybe that was interesting. And then I think I auditioned for but didn't get into Meow. I started to see, like I would go see Second City, and I just saw other people on campus who were like theater majors or film majors. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a theater major. And the dean of our school, who's so nice, sat me down and was like, I made an appointment with her to like, I want to switch into this school. And she's like, oh, so what do you want to do? And I said, I think I might want to be a theater major. And she's like, okay, well, they have an hour-long class 5 days a week, often at 8 or 9 in the morning. They study Greeks. They study, like, 19th century depressed European playwrights. They spend all this time on, like, there's, like, a tech requirement. You have to work in the shop. You got to do. And I was like, I'm going to stop you right there, Kathy Martin. I don't want to do any of this stuff.
She's like, yes, my plan worked.
Yeah. So then she was kind of like, maybe you want to be a radio, TV, film major, and that was perfect. That was exactly.
They have a board full of fun sound effects. They
exactly.
They work during drive time, but then they can sleep the rest of the day.
Yeah, I was like, you had me at radio. The TV and film part, I do not find interesting, Kathy Martin.
Draw a line for me between that and now you are like such a successful writer, actor. You've done Broadway. You've been on TV. Like what? So connect those dots for me from like, maybe I'll do this to I am full blown doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I think Meow is like a good step. Getting that, actual stage time. Getting stage time in Chicago was pretty good because I was doing shows. If I got on a team in the summer of '95, and we had like one a week or every other week. We would have rehearsals, and I was just around all the time. So I got the bug of being part of that community. But then the big thing was graduated from college, was waiting tables, stuck around in Chicago because I wanted to be around Improv Olympic, and then auditioned for and got Boom Chicago in the spring, the following spring of '97. So that, going and doing that and doing 4 shows a week for 6 months, that was like, oh, this is a job. I got paid to do something. So that was like, not just like, I'm a fan and I'm interested and I'm like, I got to figure out how to make this work. That was like, oh, I just, like, this is my job. This is all I have to do. I didn't have to like do anything. I didn't have to wait tables when I was in Amsterdam. And that, I think, set me on a path of a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I can go into more. Yeah, we'll hit all of it. I want to talk about Second City, all of it, Yeah, but the overview is that Second City, do touring, do ETC, get a writing job in LA for 6 months, then get Colbert, wrote for Colbert Report. That moved me to New York, and then that kind of led to a whole bunch of other stuff. Then Seth, and then so it's...
Yeah, you have kind of the ideal path in my mind, which is just like a slow and steady increase rather than like giant highs, giant lows, like gaps in the timeline. Yeah. It's like you are truly just climbing this hill steadily.
That's very nice for you to say because it doesn't always feel like that while it's happening. So it's nice to get some outside perspective, but...
well, it's good to look at the bird's eye view too and be like, okay, like Boom Chicago, Second City Tour Co, ETC, LA writing job, Colbert, it is like, oh, okay, these sense. Bigger and bigger venues or more bigger audiences or more respected. I mean, you've won Emmys for Colbert, right?
I did, yeah.
That's pretty big, I'd say.
It is pretty big, yeah.
Broadway is a big one. I've heard of that.
Broadway was big, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's funny, Seth used to say, like, I was like, maybe it was at that big Boom reunion, the 25-year reunion a few years back, that we were just kind of like, it's so strange to think that when we came here, we were just babies. We were 23 years old. And, there were so many things that happened after that. I mean, he had a big, obviously giant spike when he got on SNL that sort of like puts you to another plateau. But before then, and even in between, like, all the different things, because then once you're at SNL, there's all these other trials and tribulations. You're not done achieving something. You're like, as everybody has said, it's nerve-wracking and there's a lot of pressure and there's no guarantee you'll do well. And
Right.
But
Trying to get your scripts on and yeah,
everything. I mean, that's like that. Like, there's a struggle anywhere you are. Wherever you are, there's some kind of struggle and some sort of manipulating, your skills into fit whatever system you're in, or if you're all alone, like trying to figure out, the best way for your voice to come out. But it all seems so sort of like random and herky-jerky and difficult at the time. And then when you look back on it 20 years later, you're like, oh yeah, look at that straight line. It feels like you're like all over the place. But it actually, you're on something that resembles like a path.
Right. Yeah, the micro view shows tons of deviations in the graph, and then but zooming out, it's all trending upwards.
Right. Or at least even not like upwards or downwards, but like towards something. Because there's so many people that that I think we know the older you get who like they're like, I don't want to do this anymore,
Yes.
And then they can look back and go like, oh, all these other skills that I've learned that aren't like performance skills, that are like working with people, being a leader of some kind, or organizing people or producing, that has led me to this other thing where now I'm a teacher, or I run corporate workshops, or I'm a social worker or whatever. Hopefully it all goes up career-wise, but if it doesn't, there's still a path,
And I guess by upwards, I'm not trying to be quantitative or trying to prioritize like career success. I guess I think as people on our journey, we are always either deepening our spiritual understanding or growing personally. Like there is an upward trend, I think.
Yeah,
our
that's
consciousness
a good way to put it.
Elevates. Yeah,
because I think people do get so wrapped up in or consumed with or focused on more and more and more career stuff. But if you look at upward as like I am becoming more of myself, or I'm I'm deepening my like. Even if you're just like, I'm relaxing more, the more I go like
all
that.
Of that.
Yeah. That's a great way to
I'm
look at it.
Processing my old trauma. I'm discovering new things about myself. Yeah, for some people that means starting a family, or some people it means like traveling more, whatever it is. But there is sort of a growth trend,
I think.
Yeah, it's
growth. That's a good way to look at it.
So when you auditioned for Boom, was that just a lark, or was that you knew someone who had done it? Boom was pretty early in its days.
It was pretty early. Yeah, it was the 5th year. And so that was, the people I knew were, let's see, I met Tammy Sager at some point, I think before I auditioned.
I always forget that she did Boom.
Yeah, she was like year 3 or 4 maybe. And I think maybe I knew Sue Gillen, but I didn't know anybody else. I think it was, it just came across our radar, but there wasn't a link. Like, I think we were the first year where after we did it, Seth and I and some other folks, like we turned around and were like finding other people that we knew that we would bring into auditions, or people would say like, oh, those people did it. Now I know them. They've come back. They're in this world. So that must have been with Sue and Tammy, because they were around IO and they were pretty impressive. So I must have known from them, but I feel like that just went up exponentially. Yeah.
And so you got hired for that. Who did you go over with? Who was your cast?
So it was me, Seth Meyers, Allison Silverman. We all lived together in 181 Haarlemmerweg, which I feel like other people, eventually Boom people, live there too.
Before my day, but I love that part of town.
Yeah, it was cool. Right. West, like the end of the 10 tram, I think it was.
And now it's like really happening. Like that's
really?
Becoming like the new Jordan. Yeah, it's like
that's
bustling.
Cool.
And the Westergasfabriek is now all like bars and cool restaurants and I
went to like a rave there or something in Turkey. It was really fun. But when we were there, it was like all immigrants. It was all like Middle Eastern immigrants and stuff. We were the only white people. But so Allison, who was the showrunner for Colbert and has written for a million different things.
When you were there and roommates with Seth and Allison, and I know you're already friends with Seth, but now you're working with them closely. Did you have an inkling of the rare talent that you were among? That it's like Did you feel like, oh, we're all gonna do something, or this is kind of special, or
Not really.
like
I
that's
mean,
a talented crowd, you know?
it was a very talented crowd. I mean, the fact that like Seth and Allison both have gone on. Well, it's actually I would include myself in this. We've all been the executive producer of or showrunner of some kind of late night show.
Yeah, all
Seth,
late night. Yeah.
Seth obviously SNL and then his show. Allison was Colbert, and then I was the showrunner for the President show. I was the last person to do it, but I think we all liked each other. And we all had a similar sense of humor, and so it felt more like that. It felt more like this is a good trio. Like we really like each other, and we were probably a little too isolated from the rest of the cast. I think we probably socialized more just with ourselves, or you're 23,
Except for
so
that
you're
rave.
that everybody was that rave. There was no discernment there. It's not really raves don't keep people out.
I want to get into some Amsterdam stories.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Were you pretty straight-laced before that? Was a rave
No.
unusual for you? You weren't. Okay.
A rave was unusual in that I was 23 and it was 1997, and like I wasn't old enough to have lived enough outside of college to have like discovered raves, on my own. And I mean, they weren't even raves necessarily. It was just like, we're going to go dancing at that, the Milkveg or Vestergasfabriek or somewhere. But I wasn't like Brendan Hunt, who was like, I'm a choir boy, and then like, I'm the devil as soon as it gets to Amsterdam. No, I did my fair share of partying, but yeah.
Give me some outlier memories from Amsterdam. Some like, what's a weird time you had there?
So Seth and Allison and I lived together, and again, we were very cliquey. We really liked each other a lot, and we were stingy with our relationships with the rest of the cast. It could have been a lot, nicer to everybody. I mean, I hope we didn't like ruin people's times or anything. I don't think we were mean. I think we were just sort of like cliquey. But when there would be nights where all three of us were doing the show, there'd be nights when two of us were doing the show, and on a night where only one of us was doing the show, that person would like do a whole bit of like sadly, like packing up their stuff and very slowly, like over exaggeratingly, like sadly leaving the apartment. And we had a record player that we bought, for like 10 guilders or something. Guilders, not euros.
Yeah.
Got paid in cash, no bank account.
Wow.
We would put Frank Sinatra's My Way on the record player, and the person, it would be like, and now the end is near. And then the person would sadly be like packing up their bag and getting ready to go and slowly walk out. And then I remember they would even walk out onto the street, and we'd open up the window on the second floor and like turn it up really loud and wave at them as they left.
Hang a rain machine out the window so it rains only on them.
Just a hose.
Yeah.
And they look up at the sky. No, it was so. I mean, it was like an over-exaggerated bit.
That's great. And you have no terrible corporate stories. Those are my favorites.
My first show in the theater was a corporate gig, and there were so many people that they just bought the entire thing out. And for whatever reason, Boom is like sort of cabaret tables where they're emanating out from the stage, or they're placed throughout the theater, but they're all facing the stage. These people came in and set up this like long banquet table that was going parallel to the stage. So half of the people sitting at that table, their back was to the stage. Had their backs to the stage. So we came out, we were like, hi everybody, we're Boom Chicago. And it was just people eating and turning over their shoulder like, what? And then seeing us speaking English, because they were all some Dutch company, and they stopped looking at us and just turned back around and ate their food.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. To lose focus to like a baked potato is on your first show.
It was so, and I was trying so hard. I was like, oh, I'm just going to like perform these scenes so intensely. And of course they didn't care. They really just like, they were told to go to this place, and whoever like set the gig up was the person that really blew it.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson. It's a real character builder. My time at Boom was like equal parts. Well, not equal parts. Maybe 2/3 of it was these shows where you feel like an absolute rock star, and everyone wants to buy you a drink after, and there's a TV crew there, and blah blah blah. Yeah. You're hosting MTV countdown shows, and the other third is like, not only do people not know who you are, they are either bothered by you or confused by you or they hate you. Here you are at 9 a.m. Invading their meeting with something they don't understand. Or like one of my corporate shows was a wedding. And it was me, Jim Woods, and Rachel Miller, and the bride was a fan of Boom Chicago, and nobody else there knew who we were or cared,
so funny.
Including the husband. And she hired us to do 3 15-minute sets in the middle of their reception, in the middle of the dance floor. So for
Just
each one,
breaking up.
Yes, everyone's having the time of their lives dancing. Ties are loose, shirts are unbuttoned, people are hoisting people, and we had to like scoot them off the dance floor, stop the DJ, the lights turned on really bright. We had to shush people.
You know who was the most pissed at the DJ? The DJ's like, You're ruining my whole vibe. I'm trying to get these people dancing. You're ruining it.
That was a 30-minute remix of Everybody Dance Now. Yeah. Oh, God.
I do have one more Boom story. It's the best. So there's that bridge, the Junkie Bridge.
Yeah.
Where we would go to buy stolen bicycles.
Featured in an episode of Ted Lasso.
Yeah, and they were actually they were on that bridge, right?
Yes.
Yeah. They were on the actual bridge, which is not that bridge anymore. I mean, it is the bridge, but it's not.
People don't do that anymore.
People don't do that anymore. Yeah. Boy, things have sure changed. But
America does drugs and Amsterdam doesn't have junkies. What a wife swap.
Right, exactly. That's the M. Night Shyamalan twist. Like, you see someone buying a bike from a junkie. You're like, I'm in Amsterdam, and then they're like, hello, sir. I'm in America. I bought a bike there. And I mean, that was the era. You'd buy a bike there for like 10 guilders, and then you'd buy a lock for like 20 guilders or whatever. It was more expensive to buy the lock. And I had a girlfriend who I was dating in Chicago, and she came out to visit. So we went to the bridge to get her a bike. And this is well before, like now you'd be like, just go to that bike rental place and it'll be really cheap for a week. Those just didn't exist. There was like a tour company where you could go, but they didn't have bike rental places. It's funny to like live in a time in a place where you're like, there was not like the most basic infrastructure just like wasn't there.
Right. And it was not set up for tourists at all.
Not
and
as
now
much.
It's the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. It's way more tourist friendly. I mean, there was like go to the red light district and like see a sex show type tourism, but not the like, this is a real city, you guys. Like, not only perverts come here, like people actually want to like enjoy themselves.
Right.
So we went to go buy her a bike, and she found one that she liked, and I paid the guy, I had like a 50 guilder thing in my pocket and like a 10 guilder thing. Gave him the 10 and got the bike for 10 guilders. Started riding it away, and I had my own bike at the time. So she starts riding it away, and there's like a problem with it. It's like not riding smoothly. It's like the gears aren't working or whatever it was. It was like, this is fucked up. She was going to be there for a week. And I was like, we should just go back and just like get it. He's not going to care. Let's just like trade the bike. So we go back and he's like, no trades. I was like, oh, okay, fine. Well, I'm like, I'll get another one. He's like, okay. And, he just had, like, I had already stolen another one. So I give him, get another one, and I'm like, do you want this one bike, the shitty one? He's like, no, I don't even want it, so we put it to the side. So then we get another one, and he already knows I'm like a complete sucker and an idiot, and I'm like, so this is 10, right? And he's like, no, it's 20. And I'm like, fuck, okay, fine. So then, because he senses like she needs a bike. He's like, this dude is buying a bike for this woman. So then I reach into my pocket, and I only have a 50 guilder note. So then I give him a 50 guilder note, and I ask him if he has change, and he's like, no, I don't have change. So then I'm like just sitting there stuck, like looking at him and then looking at my girlfriend, and I'm like, okay, well, here's 50 guilders then, just take it. And like that was, I think we made like 80 guilders a show or something like that, or 85. It's a big amount of money.
Yeah.
So then I gave him that, and then I gave him the first bike back. And then we just like rode off, and I was like, I'm such a fucking idiot. So I just felt like such a schmuck. And then the next day, I walk into the theater we were rehearsing or something. It was during the day, like early. And the bartender, Marcel, same guy who gave me my rag for my head, was like, "Hey, nice job. You're in the Het Parool," which is the biggest or one of the biggest papers.
Yeah, it's one of the two biggest papers, I think.
Two biggest papers. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So not the like main section, but like the B section of Het Parool, there's a full page, front page story about like, it's like a sting operation of like taking pictures of people buying bikes at the Junkie Bridge. Because it was like somebody at the paper was like, it's time we do a story about this paper where like drug addicts can sell bikes. And there are 3 pictures on the front page of me walking up to the guy, me handing the guy money, and me putting my leg over the bike and riding away.
This is one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
It was the best.
Oh,
and they barely pixelated out my face, but it's so clearly me. I have like a very distinctive like bow-legged body. I'm like skinny with these like weird bow legs like a fucking cowboy from a cartoon. And Laura, my girlfriend, had like this like really distinct like short haircut. I'm like, that's us. I mean, this is just like
us.
It's so clearly us.
God. And it explains why they got another bike so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, like they have like a news van full of bikes that they're on a conveyor belt.
I think we were definitely part of this. I mean, that's not, we're not going to get arrested or anything. It was more like a public service story to just tell everybody. But then it was just so fucking embarrassing.
That's
it was
so funny. Do you still have the paper?
I do. I have like a bunch of old papers in boxes somewhere, and
that deserves to be immortalized, even more than it already has been. I want to chug forwards here. The next major thing you do is Second City Tour Co.
Yeah, I was like understudy for a little bit, and then I started touring in like beginning of '98. It was fun. I mean, that part of my life was great. That was like a real, like I was doing Second City shows. You do like between 4 or 5 and like 8 a month if that was a busy month. Going out on the road, doing some home shows, like driving to Iowa, but also like I went to Austria, went to California a couple of times. The last thing I did was we did a USO tour of shows went to Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Kuwait.
What year was that, and what was that like?
That was 2001. I got back 3 weeks before 9/11.
Wow.
From that tour. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That tour was amazing. I mean, that was like the very last thing I did. And so I was, very comfortable at that point in the job of being a tour co-actor, written some things that were in the show. It was just, it was really great. It was the performance venues were very thrown together because it was often just like outside on a stage. It looked a lot like what you would picture a USO tour to look like, just like a lot of soldiers sitting around in their uniforms.
I've seen White Christmas.
yeah. Or like the scene in, is it Apocalypse Now, where there's a show and they have to like take the Playboy bunnies or cheerleaders up the helicopter. Yeah. Everything except for that. Everything before that looked pretty similar. But the misogyny was there for sure. The Second City touring companies were 3 men and 3 women. And the men got laughs and the women got like catcalled.
Wow.
Like they'd be walking out like just doing a regular scene. It'd be like, woo, woo, woo. Right. Whistling, excessive whistling.
Right. It's like they're playing like the straight man in a scene like, okay, I have your test results from your examination. Yeah, woo, honey.
Take your shirt off. Tell him that. Do that line again, but with your shirt off.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was incredible. I mean, they were also, obviously they weren't just like a bunch of like sex-starved like rabid dogs. They were really appreciative and very nice afterwards. And
did you get to hang out?
We did. We hung out a little bit. The best hang was, so in Saudi Arabia, they have this base, Prince Sultan Air Force Base, that is like one of the bigger ones, and they have this like double wide trailer that's a bar called the Wadi Lounge, and you're not allowed to drink in the kingdom. And I mean, they think Saudi Arabia looks the other way on a lot of things, and one of them is like on this one part of this base, the U.S. gets to have like a little bar situation. So that was really fun. There were like not every it wasn't like every enlisted guy gets to walk through. They probably have like parse it out and give people like certain nights. But we like shot pool and hung out with some of the people that were some of the officers, and drank beers, and it was
That's
really,
so cool.
it was really fun. Super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So your second city time gives way to, you keep saying this writing job in LA. What's the writing job and how did you get it? And were you always a writer, or did that kind of percolate at your time at Second City?
It really, I think it percolated most at Second City, but I was like obsessed with being on the Daily Show. I was Becky Drysdale's brother Eric was a writer there, and I through him was able to submit writing. I think I submitted like 5 times to the Daily Show over time. Like I met him when I was in a cast with Becky, and maybe even before, but we were on ETC together, and he was very nice.
He's
and
super
just said,
kind. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just like, oh yeah, if you have a script, like I'll just pass it along, And I think Becky probably vouched for me and was like, he's good, he's smart, He's like, I think I was just naturally one of those people that was like in that vein. I was drawn to that type of writing. So I submitted a bunch, and I submitted the last time I submitted, they were like, you were close, but you didn't get it. But there was a writer there who was doing a pilot. He was doing like a sort of a spin-off type thing that was going to be Daily Show, but for sports, which they've tried, 100 times. And eventually Norm Macdonald did one that actually made it to the air. But this guy was like, hey, I saw your packet. It was good. I saw they didn't hire you. Can you write one for this sports show? And kind of gave me the specs for that. And so then I wrote like a whole other long packet that was just like sports based. It was basically Daily Show format, but just with sports stories. And I got that job, and that was a pilot. So that got me to LA. I met somebody on the staff who had an agent who was young and looking to sign new people. So that's how I got a writing agent. And then that guy, through that person, I got this other job, which was the Naked Trucker and T-Bones show, which was Dave Keckner, who was one of the first people I saw do that Armando show back in the mid-90s.
Listeners will know him from Anchorman. He plays the champ. Yeah. The cowboy hat guy.
Yeah. But yeah, that was really fun. So that got me that. And then I kind of almost got hired for Craig Ferguson's show. My agent knew somebody there, and they were looking for people, and I submitted a packet there. I actually flew out. I went and flew out and had a day where it was like almost like an audition, like come sit in our writer's room at Craig Ferguson and see if you fit. And didn't get hired, which was great, because then like 3 months later I got hired for Colbert, and then moved to New York.
Yeah.
So that was like that. That was a level up. I mean, I've had a slow and steady, but that was like a very significant, really cool, like a first like big job on a show that was steady and was not going away. It was really great. And
very similar, like the twin brother to The Daily Show, like which was your ultimate goal. So did you feel when you got Colbert and working there, did you feel like you had achieved your Daily Show dream, or did that remain kind of your Waterloo?
No, I definitely felt like I achieved it, because at that point I was really excited by what Colbert was doing, and it was really different, and it was like hitting all the same notes but just coming at it from a different angle, from a more of a character angle, which was really fun, because then it was kind of like that, like late night type joke writing, but also character stuff. So also like, everything had to be funneled through Steven playing this character, which was this like ultra conservative. So sort of the opposite take from just like all the writers for The Daily Show would just be like John speaking as himself, but then we got to take this different tack.
Yeah, you got to do the satire portion.
Yeah, and that was really fun. And I was hired by Allison Silverman, who was my roommate in Amsterdam.
Wild.
And that wasn't right away. Like I tried 3 times also to submit to Colbert. So between the two of them, I submitted 8 times, 8 packets, and then finally got hired.
Did she know it was you submitting, or were these blind reads?
It was not blind. No, she definitely knew. And she tried to, she asked me to submit for the first round, and I got, I guess, the equivalent of a callback. I had a phone interview with Steven, but didn't get hired right away when the show started. It was a small writing staff, including Eric Drysdale. Then eventually I was able to break through, and then that was great. It was really great.
During those 8 times where you weren't getting it, were you discouraged? Were you questioning anything, or was it like, nah, this is part of the job and I'll just do other stuff?
With The Daily Show, I felt like by the time I did my last one, I was like, I would watch the show and then reread my packet and be like, I feel like this is pretty good. And looking back, I think it probably was really good. Or as good as it could be for someone who wasn't actually working there. So I could feel myself getting better at it, because that's kind of the only way you get better at those things. You can get better at sketch writing by doing sketches and putting them up. But if you want to write for late night, you just have to like kind of do late night writing. And the packet is a very specific skill. You're working in a span of a week. You know, the word goes out and like, it's Monday. Next Monday, give us a packet with all these things in it.
Interesting.
Which I don't know if that's how things are done necessarily anymore, but that's definitely how it was.
And it would be like, we need a desk piece, we need like 3 news jokes, or like just a laundry list of
something outside the studio usually. Give us like 3 top of show stories, like 3 Daily Show stories, like RFK Jr. has a worm in his brain, like give us like a paragraph with like 8 jokes or whatever on that, and then pick another one. And then you couldn't watch the show the week that you were working on it, because you didn't want to like get influenced by them and stuff. But
were you ever worried that even though you weren't watching the show that week, was it in the back of your mind like, I hope they didn't use this same joke, like, so that it doesn't look like you copied?
I think so. I mean, I think if you ever I would assume, and having ultimately been on the other side of something like that, of receiving packets when we started doing the President Show, I mean, I would assume that if somebody wrote something that, was so similar to something we had done, you would just assume that they hadn't seen it, because nobody would be so stupid as
nobody would do that, right?
Hand in what you had written, I mean, what you had talked about.
What were the things that you were looking for when you were in that position? What made a packet stand out to you?
It was definitely like sharpness in the writing, which is something that you can't really teach. It's just somebody has been writing long enough to, the sentences aren't too long. The setups are not like 3 sentences and then there's like a 3-word punchline. Just somebody that kind of either intuitively or through experience understands that like brevity is pretty important, directness is important. And then that sort of X factor of just like someone's sense of humor, which you can't teach, at all, is just like, are they going to make you laugh? Is it going to be unusual? Is it coming from a, like a specific place that isn't something that you've seen or heard or you don't have on your staff? That's always
That's what I was going to ask. Like, I was wondering whether, in terms of comedic voice, whether they're looking for like a voice match to the host or the general like spine of the show, or whether they want a tentacle that branches it out into a different zone.
I feel like it's more the tentacle one, because especially now, these shows have so many people writing for them. So there's a really big center of the show, like there's a lot of energy and thought that's happening at the middle of like the bullseye of that show. And I think the more the show has been on, the more they're just like, I want to see something different. The host is like, of these shows that run forever, they're just like, give me something that's like slightly different, or someone who comes in and is still on the map, but they're like way in a quadrant that we don't operate in really at all. I think if you're like if I ever give people advice about this stuff, I always just say like, don't be so far away that they're like, this person's brilliant, but they don't belong on our show. You always have to like adopt a little bit of like what's going on, but the ratio should be way more you than the show. It should be at least 2/3 you and 1/3 the show.
Did your background in improv show up in those writers' rooms at all? Like, were you improvising bits and talking through them with the other writers? Were you jumping into character? Like,
Yeah, I think so. I think that like Colbert was the longest sustained job that I had. I worked there for 3.5 years, and that was definitely like I got better at figuring out, like how to formulate a pitch before bringing it up. You get there a little bit early before the sort of morning pitch meeting and kind of hunt for stories, or maybe you were hunting for stories the night before, or just had something that you were tracking over the course of a couple of days. And you got good at kind of like figuring out what it's going to ultimately look like when you say it out loud. But then I think my improv skills at that point were really well used if somebody else had an idea and I thought of something on top of it. And it's not scenic improv, but it's that same like it's just unlocking the lock. It's like not being stuck on like I don't know what to say. It's like because once you get to a certain point, you just want whatever your sense of humor is to just flow. And I think that I was probably in the top half of the people there because a lot of people were good at it, but that was one of my skill sets, was being able to just like improvise, adding on to things in the room.
Yeah. Is that like a certain level of trust in yourself that was fostered during your improv days? Like no matter what, if I just move forward or pull the plug off of this, I'm going to find something, right? I know that I'm going to land.
Yeah. And I mean, I do that now. I think when I do Wait, Don't Tell Me, that NPR radio show, that it comes up a lot because they edit that show. We record it for like 2 hours and they edit it down to an hour. And there's lots of questions that they ask and topics that get brought up that you just kind of go off on, and maybe it doesn't work, but they distill it down to the best version. And I feel like that is what they want. Like when they bring new people in, they're like, just talk. You can say what you want. You can go down a road that isn't fruitful because we'll always edit it out. It's no big deal. And then you'll always like, that might lead to something that actually is good. So I have a trust in that process, that like just open, unfettered, unafraid talking and riffing will get somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that stops a lot of people from a lot of things. I think it stops people in their own writing and being like good in group, in conversation. I mean, you think about it's like such a basic thing that people are like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to open my mouth. Everyone's going to think I'm an idiot. And the person who talks the most sounds more like an idiot than the person who's just like is tempered, but they just put it out there, and every fourth thing they say is smart or funny or whatever it is.
Right.
But they don't care.
Right. Well, that's why the quiet people are staying quiet. They don't want to be the guy who's an idiot. But there's like a happy medium somewhere where, you improvise now. Do you still do Foursquare, or is it just you and Lutz?
It's just Lutz. Lutz and I do Two Square. We just had a show last night.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, it was fun. And
where do you guys play?
It's at Caveat on the Lower East Side in Manhattan.
Is that an improv theater or a theater space?
It's an everything theater. They have some improv there. Rat Scraps, which is like what ASCAT sort of used to be in New York, is now reconstituted there. There Sunday nights. So they have a fair amount of improv there, but they also have a lot of fun, like one-off shows, like high concept, weird shows, and stand-up shows. It's a good sort of like all-purpose place. But yeah, I'm improvising there. I do Rat Scraps a little, kind of infrequently, but every once in a while.
When you and Lutz play, do you do an organic set? Are you pulling premises from an interview? What's your style?
Our thing is we get one suggestion and then just go for 40 or 45 minutes. But it's more like it all kind of goes back to this JTS Brown show that we did like in Chicago.
Oh, you were in JTS Brown.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, tell me about that. You guys invented, like it's known now as the JTS Brown form.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, talk to me about that. Walk our audience through that.
Sure. So we were a group of people who were like just experienced enough to be bold and think we should be doing Armando, but not experienced enough to be asked to do Armando. So we were kind of this like generation of people who were, like we want to do something that's our thing. And there had been these long group like experimental improv shows before us. There was Jazz Freddy and Lois Kaz and Slotnick Cats and Lair and a few other sort of like non-Herald group shows that were, now they're extremely common. People are like, we're a group, we don't do a Herald, we do whatever, we do it, or like various things. Oh, The Family had done like the movie and the deconstruction and things like that. So there were always like, that was in the air. But so it was like me, Bumper, Carol, Ike Barinholtz, Jason Sudeikis, and I think maybe someone else. But that was like the 4 people that kind of initiated it. And then it was 12 people were in the group. And we would do, Craig Kukowski directed us. Mainly Mick Napier started directing us and then had to split. But Craig directed us. We just came up with a bunch of techniques that were like things that you could do to get from scene to scene that were not sweep edits. So everything from like taking over someone's character. Like anybody could play any character at any time. There were all these like really specific things that it's not quite worth going into because I'm sure there's a document online that Craig wrote that says all the specific techniques. But we rehearsed for like a year and just built up this like very open, freeing, trusting environment where kind of anything could happen. And it's like this weird kind of amorphous blob that would like grow and shrink and move and use all parts of the theater, and it was very, very open. And so
I remember when I was in level 5 at at IO, and we were learning different forms and techniques. We learned, I think, your opening, or just a thing that you would do, which was like character monologues kind of around the theater in a circle. Does that sound correct?
Our opening was one person getting a suggestion, starting a monologue, and like it was like wedding, and then there would be a character. They'd be like, I've been a wedding DJ for such a long time, I can't even remember when I started. And they're talking, and then somebody would come out from the side of the stage and walk in front of that person and then stand up and then take over where they had been like left off. So then everybody, however many people there, because it wasn't always 12, everyone would do the monologue as this character. And then that would kind of end by whenever the last person went, they would just sort of like finish, and then a scene would start. So it was all this information that kind of came out in that.
Yeah. I teach that now as a template for a non-scenic group game in a Herald.
Oh, that's great.
I teach it with just normal tags rather than like amorphously like standing in front. But to me, it has a high success rate for teams that are like only doing everybody get in here games and kind of don't have like templates or like the expanded view of what it could be. And that's a really good one because it forces you to heighten one comedic idea to completion, if you land on something. But in your context, you're using it as an opening. So the idea was to generate as much info as possible.
Yeah, and I think also it served 2 purposes. It was like get all this information out, but it was really to just like start the ball rolling on everybody being responsible for every part of the show. That it was like this big... having everybody play the same character was like a little metaphor essentially for like everybody could do that at any other point. And it was just a loose amorphous way to kick off a show that was loose and amorphous.
Yeah. Where did that ethos come from? Of everybody should be responsible for every part of the show. I love that.
I mean, I think it was a big Craig thing. But it developed naturally. I mean, it was a joke at the time that we rehearsed for so long, but it did give us a chance to like go in one direction and then come back and then go in another direction. And I think once we started figuring out we don't want to do sweep edits, we just want to be able to kind of get from thing to thing. It was like, what are fun ways and cool creative ways that we can be like. Because there were so many people, too, we knew, like, the only way this is going to work is if everybody is, like, if it's, like, everybody is, whatever, 7% or whatever it is of the show, and there's the best way to do that with a big cast show is to kind of be, like, we're all involved and all could be there all the time, but we also all have to be responsible for, like, backing off. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it just built sort of piece by piece. Yeah, it was really fun. It was a great ethos.
Yeah, I wish that I could have seen one of your shows. I feel like I just missed it.
Somebody must have them somewhere. But.
Oh yeah, I mean yeah. If that's online, I'll search around, or if somebody can get it online, people would love to see that.
I wonder where it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. So now when you and Lutz perform with two of you, how does that translate?
I mean, when we did Foursquare, it was basically like a smaller version of that, but it was a little bit easier just in terms of like you could actually be off stage for a scene. But with Lutz and I, it's like we're everything all the time. We morphed it into like we just do a long grounded scene at the top just to kind of like settle everything. And then the show kind of picks up. It sort of spirals out from there in intensity and weirdness and pace. And we play multiple characters and we do different things. It's like if you took a TJ and Dave show and like shook it up and like things were a little more chaotic and hectic because they're so like set and you know, grounded in sort of one general idea. They don't change locations even that much. I mean, other than like contiguous spaces. But yeah, John and I do much more chaotic stuff.
Is there a technique for perfecting the art of playing each other's characters, or is it just practice?
I think it's just practice. I mean, I think also because we know each other so well that the characters are, when I look at, I've been watching him do characters for so long that like it's just an imitation in some ways, but it is practice, and it's like honoring something specific that they did, you know, like a hand gesture or posture or a tone of voice or something like that. And it, you know, you don't have to get it exactly right. The audience is just appreciating that, like, oh, because you're now the priest and you were the wife before. If Peter wants to come over and play the wife of this marriage, then like, yeah, you're standing in that spot. We get it. Like they give you a lot of leeway because you're watching you spin plates. So they're like, that's fine. You don't have to get it exactly right.
Yeah. When I've messed around with that style of play, I find myself drifting very quickly into plot. Like I'm like playing the, you know, it feels like a play to me, and I'm playing like, well, what would happen if the wife comes in, and now what's the consequence? Rather than like digging into the characters further or playing like the game of the scene. Are you concerned with that at all, or does that not show up because you guys are such better improvisers than me?
I think well, we're not, but I think we just don't. I've never been one to be plotty. I mean, sometimes we'll call back, you know, that main heavy scene that's at the beginning, or the grounded scene. It does come back at various points, but it's more. I think we do a good job of being like more time dashier if we're talking about people in that first scene. Then when the scene comes back, we're seeing those people that we just talked about. Like we played a father and son recently, and we were talking about like, you know, your mom and sister aren't doing this right now, whatever it was, and then we saw the mom and sister later. So when somebody says something like that, I think we both know like, oh, okay, that's fine. We'll play those people later.
Got it. You're planting a flag like, oh, won't it be ironic when they're doing the same thing but worse? Or
Yeah, there's things like that you get used to. I mean, that's the nice thing. A lot of my, like, the things that I think I can, you know, rightly claim as successes in improv at this point are really just because of time. Like, I'm just used to playing certain ways, or used to being in certain situations or with certain people, and just relaxing and not getting too stressed. And that's just comes with time.
You're such... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, most new people are very concerned with how they look. Like, the times that I've taught recently, I've been like, what's getting in your way? Every single one of you, even before we start actually, like, performing and I start watching them, is like, your ego. You think that you are going to, like, look stupid, or you're disappointing somebody, or you're going to look bad, or you're going to do the wrong thing. And I never think about that. Like, when you're performing, do you ever think about, like, Susie Barrett as, like, with your ego? Like, you...
Not recently, but I used to.
No.
Or it used to be like, I think my version of that was like like often playing behind a kind of performance-y mask, you know, latching on to like a physicality or like a voice, or, you know, which I see younger players doing. It's like, oh, you're you're worried about the output or the veneer on top of this rather than just listening and connecting and saying the natural thing that this character would say or and serving the premise.
Yeah, being good at a character or being comfortable on stage, all those things naturally grow. But the thing that I think most blocks that is being worried about, like, I'm going to look stupid, just at a really base, like, fear level.
Yeah.
And it's a tough thing. You can't flip it off like a light switch, but it's something to be aware of, I think.
Do you have exercises or advice for your students to train that out of them?
I think most of it is to just force them to do things in class that are like totally against type. And one of the things that I do when I teach is like a bad habits class, or a workshop where like beforehand they identify like, here's what I tend to do. I feel like I'm never the one to initiate, or I'm too quiet, or I'm the person who talks too much, or I always play the same character. So they kind of identify that with me. And then basically it's like drills. I just have them do the exact opposite of what they say their bad habit is. Because that's just a rut. You just get used to doing one thing. And there's no reason, it's like only seeing 45 degrees of a circle. Like, the circle's there. It's always there. You can you think that there's no circle, but it's only because you're only looking at 45 degrees of it.
Yeah.
And so it's just showing them like, just turn 180 degrees and do that part over there, and then that just opens your mind up, and then you can start to piece together all of your skills.
Are you the one potential? Are you the one providing the antidote to their
I am
habit? Yeah. So if they say I talk too much, you go here. I want you to say one word lines and then pause. Or yeah.
And you can see them being like, they want to talk and then they stop. But it just forces them to be like, what can I do on stage that actually means something and is in response to this other person that isn't talking?
Yeah.
And I really think like classes and workshops, it's such a good opportunity to like athletically, like do drills, do things that are, because you got to build up these skills. Because you're too afraid when you're on stage to be like, in this show, I mean, if you luckily you can get to a place where like, in tonight's show, I'm only going to support. I'm just going to focus on this, or I'm just going to focus on initiating, or I'm just going to whatever. But people don't perform that much. Every show is so precious. You're so just like amped up on this show energy. So I feel like doing that in class is really good.
Yeah, it gives you time on the field. And I've had students say like, oh, but is that like pre-planning to say I'm only going to play high status characters tonight, or I'm going to listen more, or not initiate? And my theory is it's not pre-planning to
no, not at all.
To lean into a certain just give yourself a personal style of play or something.
It's like a mindset where if you're just totally open and blank, well, guess what? The other 10 shows you did last month or whatever, or the last couple months, you kept making that same, not mistake, but you kept making that same move that is putting you in a place to go like, I wish I wasn't doing that. So unless you actively fight against it, you're going to keep doing it. There's like, you've shown that that's just human behavior. That's the way we perform. That's just like improviser, I don't know, logic or something, but you do kind of have to work against it. And I like doing it for people who are like, I've been performing for 10 years, but I'm kind of in a rut and I feel like I'm just doing this. And I just made that realization about the ego thing recently. I just like saying it to people because it just plants it in their head, and they can't do anything right away, but they can maybe start to chip away at it. Yeah.
When did that go away for you, or did you never have that in your
Oh, I absolutely had it. And I can identify it because you watch somebody now and you're like, I can see my behavior in you. I can see the fear. I can see the like flash of like, oh, that was really good. How do I repeat that? Like, how do I do that again? When did it go away? I mean, I think probably, I mean, there's certain instances where it's always, I always have like a focus in it. Every time I do Two Square with John, I'm always like, I'm going to focus on this thing. But the ego thing probably went away maybe like 4 or 5 years in ish. I feel like by the time I was touring and by the time I got to ETC, I probably wasn't there because I just was doing a lot of shows and just comfortable on stage, not just improvising, but just comfortable on
Yeah.
stage.
When I've seen you play, you're a very understated player. I mean that as a compliment. Like you're not
Thank
you're
you.
not pushing or you're not trying to telegraph a laugh. And I've seen you get huge laughs on just the simplest responses, like you just saying "mm-hmm" or whatever, you know.
That's nice.
It's cool, and it's been a lesson for me in, oh, you really can just play as completely yourself, and that can sometimes be funnier than anything you could make up. It just like literally just being comfortable in your own skin leads to unexpected laughs because you are just so bare and small, you know.
That's great. I mean, and I'm glad you think that. I think that I also have been like a straight man comedically that's just like I've fallen into a pocket where that type of play is usually fits. Like the other person then gets to do more, you know, larger characters or more acrobatics or whatever it is. But so maybe it's easier for me to like give that advice because it's like happens to line up with my sense of humor. But
What happens when do times arise where you need to play the unusual one, or do you just always
oh yeah,
sort of, yeah.
yeah, I do. I mean, I actually do it more with John just because we just end up going back and forth. So we there's only two of us, so we kind of those roles sort of switch. Or I don't know. I think now I do try to take like a holistic picture of my performance and go like, I'm going to do this now, and then I'm like, okay, and then the next scene, like at a Rat Scraps where you can be off stage for a bit, and I go, okay, my next scene, I'm going to try to just be a little more high energy because that other one was kind of low energy, just to like give myself a little bit of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you prefer premise pulling or organic, or are they both equal?
Oh, like a monologue then into.
Yeah.
I for me it's like if I only had to do one, then I would miss the other so much. But I like both. I don't think that there's any like intrinsically like good or bad thing about either of them as they exist in a panoply of options of ways to improvise. But I think I came up so much more in the IO world of like everything's like open and you're taking stuff from the opening, but it's not necessarily like as hard as like UCB style. But then I did ASCAP for so many years in New York that I loved that, and it was so fun. And when somebody was really good at it, you know, it was like, oh, this is what we're going to do right now. You just told me in 10 words
Yeah.
what the scene is going to be. So
I would think that would appeal to your writer brain.
yeah.
But it makes sense. I mean, yeah, I also like both for different reasons.
Yeah.
Was it weird to start doing that style, that sort of UCB style, after so much of like what I call hot tub improv, where you're just kind of like floating around amorphously and just like
Yeah,
basking in
funny.
what the character is?
No, I think that it's probably more my style, my more natural style. Like I took classes at The Annoyance once, and Mick was like, you need to stop trying to explain what's happening. It's like, which is exactly why I went into classes with Mick. I was like, please, like, break down the like world that I've built for myself, this comfortable little thing, like smash it with a hammer so I don't get too, you know, stuck in this. But he was so right. It would be like something, you know, like they would say something, I would say something, they would say something, and then my fourth line would be like, I'm going to explain everything that has happened in the last 3 lines.
Which UCB would call like framing the game, or like a labeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is more my sense. It's just more like my style of how I naturally want to be, you know, doing things. But then you could take somebody who's like a complete devotee of Mick. You know, like I worked with Connor O'Malley. I've improvised with him. Like, it's the last thing Connor's going to do is going to be like, let me explain everything that's happening right now. It's just complete like character and chaos. But like then we would do fun scenes together because like the audience would get a little bit of both. They'd get the chaos and they'd get the little explanation, and then it'd be like, okay, I'm comfortable. This is fun now.
Do you have a favorite type of character to play, or like what archetypes do you love?
Browbeaten teachers or principals, people who are like they've been through a lot and they're just trying to they just want to be liked, but they also want to get the thing done that they want to get done. Because I think it's fun to just be like, sure, yeah, that's right, yeah, Anthony, thank you for that. We do want to keep going though. Like I like that type of energy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like mean teacher or mean principal, but
no.
Like,
just has been dragged through it probably has like a dirty collar of his shirt and is rubbing his forehead a lot.
Yeah, definitely lives in a the Oakwood after his divorce or something.
Yeah,
like that.
So you like low status.
I do like low status. I mean, I think it's also fun to do like dumb high status, or like high status with like where it's clear that like Peter Grosz, and the audience are like, I'm making fun of this douchebag that I'm playing, you know?
Yeah.
I like that's fun.
Do you have a teaching philosophy or something that you feel like is your point of view when you get into a classroom that you are imparting?
I think it would be this like drop your ego thing, because I find that is just a new thing that I've discovered that I think is like kind of winds up being something that when I say it and people listen to it, they like it makes sense to them. And I don't know, I'm like passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't know. I guess I'm
kind of feel like I'm sort of
passionate.
No, it's like when you're teaching something, you want to believe in it. You know, you want to mean it. Yeah,
no, it's just a very egoless way of expressing passion. I don't know. I guess if you call it passion, it's sort of like that.
Yeah.
So you're practicing what you preach.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you get nervous for shows anymore? Like when you did Broadway,
Yeah.
was that nerve-wracking?
Broadway was only nerve-wracking if I knew that there were certain like well-known people in the audience. Sean Hayes, who was the star of the show, he liked knowing. But so his husband was like at every show and kind of managed to like, this famous person is coming and they're gonna come to your dressing room afterwards. I didn't like knowing then because it would put me in my head. I'd be like, that person's here, Steve Martin's here, or like mm-hmm. Amy Poehler and Tina Fey came to a show, and I got really in my head about like they were on stage at IO when I first started, like 28 years ago or whatever the hell it was, and so like now they're watching me on Broadway. Like I would start to like tell myself little stories. And I just was like, I don't need to know that kind of stuff. So otherwise, no, I think I'm pretty good at just being like, I'm just doing this when it's scripted. I get nervous when I do stand-up because I don't do it enough to be like super natural mm-hmm. and super flowy. But and I also just like want it to work.
When things don't work, do you have a way to get back on course, or do you just sink with the ship?
Like mid
stand-up, I guess.
Show,
mid improv. Like, do you start to flounder when you're like, they are not laughing? Or I guess in improv it comes up more where you would have the option to make an adjustment, go higher energy, or what? Like, what's your tick with that?
Yeah, I think I would. I think when it's not working in improv, I feel myself trying to like force a laugh or something, and then my second reaction, which hopefully comes soon after that, is like, just don't do that. Because that never works. It's never like, I'm so glad I pushed.
Right. Yeah, I'm so glad I foisted myself even more aggressively onto this audience that is unsure about us.
Yeah, exactly. Because they can't smell when you're pushing. They're so stupid. They're not human beings that only receive information, through like visual cues. Like everybody completely can feel that feeling of the performers pushing. So I try not to do that. And stand up, I'm just going to keep going and be done, because I don't feel like trying to convince you. And I definitely don't feel like berating the audience and telling them that they're stupid for not getting my jokes. I'm just like, this will be over soon. I'm just going to leave.
Yeah. Do you, in terms of process, do you prefer improv or stand up?
I mean, I think I prefer improv just like from my gut, but I think I sort of I like stand-up a lot, and I'm sort of forcing myself to do it because it's less lazy. You know, that there's some like work that goes into it, and it's like forcing me to like, you know, think about the world and like what do I want to say about, I have 10 minutes, like what am I going to talk about? And I think it's a little like, I was so reared on improv stuff that I'm like, I want to be less lazy right now. I want to actually be like, I want to have a show where I try to figure out what I want to do beforehand, and I want to like execute. And yeah.
I mean, early on in my career, someone said improvisers are just lazy writers, and I was like, huh, yeah. I should start writing more. I don't want to be called lazy. Couldn't it just be that we have more fun and it's a team sport? Like, why does it? Yeah.
That's part of it too, for sure.
Yeah. And what has improv brought to your life?
God, everything. I can't think of a single thing that I'm doing now or I have enjoyed doing in the last 30 years, 29 years that would have happened had I not walked into that class at IO in the spring of 1995. But specifically, I think it has brought me like a way to express myself comedically, but also to just like view the world and the like difficulties that come through. Like when you do corporate workshops and you blow their minds by saying like, if you say yes and you listen to the other people, you'll all rise together. And it's so dumb and basic, but it's just like the most basic stuff like that is actually really true and can kind of be profound. Because if I sucked all that like way of like that ethos, if I took that away, I think I would be miserable. I don't know what I would be doing. Even if I was doing another job, if I didn't have that way of like processing life, I think I would be kind of miserable.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, let's end there. Let's end on ineffable profundity. Is there anything you would like to plug right now?
You know what I want to plug is something that's not improv. It's on Instagram. I have an account called Subway Anonymous, which is I've taken pictures of people on the New York City subway where I cut their heads off. I take them from like the neck down, and it's always like just some other interesting, it's like an interesting story or scene or something with a person or two people that I can tell by taking a picture and like maintaining that person's anonymity. And it's like a sneaky fun like art project that I've been doing for years on the subway, and I just started an Instagram account called Subway Anonymous.
Fantastic.
And I really like it. It's really fun, and it just makes me happy.
Yeah, great. We'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out.
I can't thank you enough for this, and thanks for giving you so much time. I'll see you when I'm in New York or you're in LA. Please. If you have a question about improv that you would like me to ask a future guest, email it to yesalsopod@gmail.com and I will get it on the show. If you're a fan of the show, follow us on Instagram @yesalsopod. And please help us out by liking, rating, reviewing, clicking, sending, talking, and blasting us to your improv communities. That will help us out a lot. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Ryan Rosenberg, who produced this thing with his generous help and his unlimited knowledge about all things podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Susie. That's not how podcasts work. They will see. They won't even see us. They will listen to us. So it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. We don't know.